Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Frosty Explain. Well, this is the series in which we will see what if Ash doesn't get a Pikachu, but he get a Dratini. Obviously, our Kanto Studio legendary Pokemon's first form, which we will see Dragonite in his or her evolved form. Well, I actually don't really know what the gender of this Dratini is. Let's call it her, because Dratini is really good as a female.
Because just look at it. She's slippery, she's kinda cute. And that's it. Really, that's it. So, if you're on the channel, so type down on the bell icon. And without any more ado, let's begin to this episode. Ash's Pokemon's names: Dratini, Kaiser, Charmander, Ignis, Pidgeotto, Ava, Ralts, Chia, Mankey, Trooper. Ash eyed the Raichu on Lieutenant Surge's side of the battlefield as he tried to evaluate his options in his head. The Raichu menacingly grinned, not unlike its trainer, electricity cackling from the yellow sacs on its cheeks. Defeating his Magneton had been difficult enough. Surge's Raichu appeared much stronger than it. Unlike the first time, Lieutenant Surge didn't let Ash have time to breathe or to make the first move. His grin turned even wider as he commanded, "Charge beam." "Dig." Ash responded immediately. Raichu growled as it got on all fours and shot a yellow beam of electricity towards Ignis, who'd just begun making to burrow a hole in the ground. The slam of thunderous energy missed its target and dissipated behind where Ignis stood a moment ago. The ground began to rumble as Raichu keenly observed its surroundings. Its sharp ears perked up and tail flitted, waiting for the faintest of clues of Ignis' arrival. Ash clenched his fists as he watched the battlefield, waiting for Ignis to break out of the ground. This was it. All the work that they'd put into Master Dig had to pay off. Right as Ignis tore through the soil and yanked out of the ground, Raichu's tail swiftly batted on the field, hoisting it up and out of danger, only narrowly being scraped by one of Ignis' claws. "Gov, Lieutenant Governor," Surge let out a cackle of laughter. "That's a move that Raichu can dodge in his sleep. I'll give you some credit for hitting him though." His compliment had Ash gritting his teeth as blood pumped through his veins. Get back and use Ember. The best way to tackle the situation for him was to know more about Raichu's moves and attack patterns. Hence, it was best to gain some distance and observe. He'd try to lure out Raichu's attacks before letting Ignis get close again. "Fry 'em with Thunderbolt," Surge roared back instantly. Ignis turned around to hustle towards Ash's side of the field, but Raichu cried out as sparks flew from his cheeks in Ignis' direction. The fire type managed to dodge it the first time, but another surge of electricity followed which he couldn't avoid. Ignis' shriek resounded across the gym as slits of blood spilled from the bruises and cuts on its arms. Even through all that, Ignis still managed to spit flames at Raichu, catching it in them. Both Pokémon had taken a hit each, but Raichu visibly fared far better than Ignis. Ember had barely left a few scratches that the mouse seemed to dismiss as if they'd served as no more than a warm-up for him. "Damn it," Ash cursed. Ember again. He wanted to instruct Ignis to keep his distance, but that would reveal his intentions to Surge. Although, considering he was the infamous Vermilion City gym leader, it wouldn't take long for him to deduce it. Ignis let loose another flurry of scorching wisps of fire in Raichu's direction, who dodged the attack by scurrying in a zigzag pattern on all fours. He'd built up enough distance that none of Ignis' Ember could reach them and menacingly hissed a challenge. Ash wondered if the speed it had just shown was a result of a quick attack or if it was just that fast. If it was the latter, this battle had just become even more difficult. "Thunderbolt, Gov, Lieutenant Governor," Surge shouted, a grin on his face. He folded his arms as he watched his Raichu use the same move again. "Retreat back," Ash said, calming himself a bit. Then Ember again. Ignis successfully evaded the incoming bolt of lightning, but barely. Another one headed his way as he threw out more flames in response to his trainer's command. Some of the flames managed to whirl past the Thunderbolt and catch Raichu in them, but the power of the flames had been weakened by Thunderbolt. But that hadn't happened to the Thunderbolt as Ignis took the full brunt of the electric-type attack this time, shrieking out another cry. Ash clenched his fists so hard that his fingernails bit into his palms. The battle would go only one way if it continued in this vein. There was no doubt that Raichu was quicker than Ignis, a fair bit even. And its Thunderbolt was a fearsome move that Ignis wouldn't be able to take much more of. This was clearly the reason that Professor Oak and Bill had told Ash to wait to get at least 3 badges before challenging Lieutenant Surge. He'd even heard rumors in the Pokémon Center that most trainers didn't challenge the Vermilion City Gym until they had 4 badges. Lieutenant Governor Surge had proven to be a challenge indeed, the biggest real challenge Ash had faced since he started his journey. Brock was a strong gym leader and a great Pokémon trainer, but his Pokémon didn't quite pack as much power as Surge's Raichu. Then the battle in the Cerulean Gym had been much easier than he'd expected, and that had made Ash a bit lax. Complacent, even. Get underground, Ignis. Ash yelled out. As beat up as he was, Ignis obeyed, digging a hole in the ground and disappearing from sight. Lieutenant Governor Surge and Raichu both grinned as they observed the field in anticipation of where Ignis would appear from. The ground shook again and the Charmander ascended from beneath Raichu. Lieutenant Governor Surge let out a laugh as his Raichu slipped out of the way of the attack and ran in a zigzag pattern, lights shining on its small feet. It used quick attack to dodge. Ash blurted out. Again, Raichu had dodged the attack. Its speed had proved too much for Ignis to handle. Ember. Even though he knew he'd been trying the same things over and over again, Ash had no choice. Ignis' physical attacks weren't hitting Raichu, and they wouldn't start to, unless Ignis suddenly gained a burst of speed or Raichu lost it. You just keep using the same thing, huh? Lieutenant Governor Surge raised an eyebrow sarcastically. Thunderbolt. As Ignis released flames, the yellow sacs on Raichu's cheeks let out a thundering bolt that zoomed towards his foe. As it had done previously, the Thunderbolt cut through Ignis' Ember and struck the fire type, who cried out in pain. Ash could only observe in horror as Ignis was brought to his knees. Raichu wasn't just too fast, but also too powerful. This had proven to be a mistake. Ash wasn't ready to face Lieutenant Surge. Not yet. We've had enough fun with it, Raichu, Surge snorted, his arms still folded. Put it out of its misery. Just as Raichu let another surge of electricity loose towards the struggling Ignis, the flame on his tail flared up and grew. What do you know? Surge chuckled as he watched Ignis surround itself in a bright silver, the Thunderbolt deflected in another direction. The baby Charmander is growing up. Ash couldn't utter a word at the sight that he saw. He simply watched in awe as his Ignis body grew. Even through the silver light, he could make out that a horn had appeared on his head while his claws grew sharper and his body larger. As the light faded away in a few more moments, the newly evolved Charmeleon roared vociferously, pumping his arms. The newly evolved Pokémon glared at his opponent and instantly flung himself at him. On the way, Ignis' fangs became engulfed in bright red flames. Slam it with Iron Tail, came Surge's order, but Ignis showed why he had evolved, and what he had become. Raichu didn't have enough time to complete his move as he let out an anguished cry at Ignis' fiery fangs digging into his shoulder. Fire Fang, Ash mouthed. Ash had been thinking about strengthening Ignis' fire-type moves since Ember's power would not be enough in his upcoming gym battles. It had already proved to be inadequate here. After all, Ember was pretty much ineffective against Surge's Raichu's stronger electric-type moves. His lips curled upwards at the sight of Ignis' new strength. Ignis slid back a few feet away from Raichu, glaring at it. He then eyed Ash and roared again. He still had bruises all throughout his body from the battle, but the evolution seemed to have revitalized him slightly. Ash knew what he meant. "All right, Ignis, Fire Fang again." Deflected with Iron Tail, Surge's grin never disappeared. Ignis launched himself towards Raichu again, once more displaying his newfound speed. This time though, Raichu was better prepared for the move. Its tail glowed silver and Raichu slammed it down on the incoming Fire Fang. The two attacks met, Ignis trying to bite even harder, but the strength of the Steel-type move proved too much for him to penetrate through. The two Pokémon retreated and repeated the same move, ending with the same result. "That's not gonna work," Ash muttered to himself. Ignis' evolution had only brought him to a level that he could now compete with Surge's Raichu. It wasn't that Ignis hadn't gotten stronger, just that Raichu was too strong before. Now, Ignis could match it in terms of speed as well as power. But would this be enough? Try dig again. Instantly, Ignis dug a hole and disappeared into the ground. Surge huffed, "That move's not gonna work even if your Pokemon's evolved, kid." Like so many times earlier, Raichu was again able to jump out of the way of the attack. "Quickly use Ember," Ash yelled. That had been his plan, to use Ember if Raichu managed to evade dig again. Ignis was ready for the command as he fired the attack, his flames now much stronger and hotter than when he was just a Charmander. Raichu let out a shriek as the Fire-type attack met it and left burn marks around its body. Not only that, but even after the attack, it still felt the burn sting. "Nice move, kid. That burn is gonna hurt for a while." Surge complimented Ash. "Shoot another Thunderbolt. Use Fire Fang," Ash ordered. As Ignis lunged forward as fast as he could, Raichu released its Thunderbolt. Ignis managed to get out of the way of the first wave, but the second one struck him as he closed the distance between himself and Raichu. There were even more bruises around his body and he slowed down, but he didn't stop. Raichu showed its speed as it jumped out of the way of the Fire Fang, but Ignis followed him like a rabid dog. Another Thunderbolt ensued, which Ignis dodged and then dug his fangs into the same shoulder that he had attacked previously. A few more sparks of electricity flew towards the Fire-type starter while he retreated after completing the move. Even though the sparks hit him, he wasn't as phased as before by their impact. These were much weaker than the previous electric moves that he'd been hit by. He huffed wearily, placing one of his claws on the ground for support. But that last blast of thunder was pretty much all Raichu seemed to have. They were its last attempt to take down its foe with it. Raichu lied in the middle of the field with burns throughout its body, unconscious. "You did it, Ignis." Ash cheered victoriously when he saw that Surge's Raichu had fallen. Ignis could only let out a low shriek in acknowledgement of his trainer's words. The referee waited for a few moments, apparently surprised by the outcome. But eventually, she raised her hand towards Ash. "Raichu is unable to battle. The challenger Ash Ketchum wins the gym battle." Surge pointed his Pokeball forward and his defeated Raichu was sucked into it. Even though he'd been beaten, his grin did not vanish. "That was a good match, kid," he said in a loud tone as he walked in Ash's direction. "No," he chuckled, "you've won the Thunder Badge now, you're no longer a kid." Ash couldn't help but chuckle at that. He hadn't paid Surge's kid bit much mind thus far. Ash knelt and petted Ignis on the head and recalled the flame Pokémon back into his Pokeball. He'd taken lots of hits and the evolution must have left him even more exhausted. Ash stood back up and smiled at Surge. Surge dug his right hand into his pocket and removed a golden-colored badge in the shape of a star which had a shining red core in the middle. "This Thunder Badge is now yours." Ash accepted the badge offered to him and looked at the gym leader. "Thanks, HHE said this badge had been by far the most difficult of the 3 badges he'd earned so far. Surge had proven to be the gym leader that he'd heard rumors about on his way to Vermilion City and more. That was quite a comeback. Ash heard a familiar voice from behind him. He turned around and saw the first gym leader he'd defeated walking towards him. Brock. He was quite surprised to see the rock-type specialist here. I didn't expect you to still be in Vermilion City. The tan gym leader waved at him. I had some things to take care of, and I needed to meet with Lieutenant Surge, and it just so happened that I came when you two had just begun your match. You're the Pewter City gym brat, Surge chuffed. Why are you here? What about the gym, kid? Dad has returned, so he's the gym leader now, Brock said as he came to a stop in front of Ash and Surge. So that Flint finally returned, eh? Surge laughed. I thought he'd not come back for another decade. Brock nodded. Yes, and he said that he'd like to talk to you. Surge raised an eyebrow. Talk to me? He could have just called the gym then. He received a shrug from Brock, to which he shook his head. He's quite roundabout in the things he does, that man. Ash just observed the conversation between the two. He didn't quite get what they were talking about apart from the fact that Brock's dad wanted to talk to Surge. I'll go call him now. I have to take my Pokémon to the Pokémon Center anyway, Surge said and turned to Ash. Go to the Pokémon Center and wait there for me. I have something to give you. Now that piqued Ash's interest. What was it that Lieutenant Surge wanted to give him? He had to admit that Surge had proved to be quite different as a person than he'd expected. Apart from the way he spoke, which was quite brash, he seemed like a good man. With that, Surge turned around and disappeared behind one of the doors behind the battlefield. Let's go, Ash, Brock said, turning around to walk towards the exit. It didn't take long for Ash and Brock to make it to the Pokémon Center. The first thing Ash did was give the Pokeballs of Trooper and Ignis to Nurse Joy. She told him that it would take a while before he could get them back fully healed because of how busy the Pokémon Center had been. New trainers had been aplenty in the recent months, which kept most of the rooms and doctors occupied. Ash didn't mind that. The immediate care machines in which the Pokeballs were kept already provided some instant treatment to the Pokémon that weren't severely injured, and the doctors later treated them for any injuries that remained. Ash then entered the cafeteria in the Pokémon Center with Brock, and the duo had the day's special curry. The battle had been tiring for not only his Pokémon, but also for Ash, hence he gulped the food down. He needed to recharge his brain after that match. Do you plan to leave Vermilion City already or take the SS? Anne, Brock asked as he took a spoonful of rice in his mouth. It's usually a pretty popular cruise for trainers at this time of the year. Ash chewed on the pasta, the saucy cheese melting in his mouth, leaving a sensation that had him eat another spoonful, before answering. I thought the SS. Anne already left a while back. He took a sip of water after he said that. He remembered that the reason Gary hadn't gone to visit Bill like Professor Oak had suggested was because he didn't want to miss the SS. Ash had heard quite impressive stories about the SS. Anne himself. It took people to a couple of islands that were supposed to be very good for Pokémon training. That also meant that trainers, especially those who'd recently started their Pokémon journeys, came to Vermilion City in large numbers. It was a great way to find a bunch of strong Pokémon trainers in one place. Ash had originally thought about taking the cruise, but he wasn't as fixated on it as Gary. He figured that a meeting with someone like Bill would prove to be more beneficial in the long run. And it had. He'd learned a lot from the day he'd spent with Bill, and it had been well worth missing the SS. And for him, there were some problems in the sea route that the ship follows, so it was delayed for a few days, Brock said. They've changed the departure to 8 days from now. That got Ash's full attention. The SS. Anne would be an experience worth having. I'd like to go, if that's the case. Brock nodded. I'm not sure if I want to go there myself, but if you're going, I don't mind tagging along. Ash smiled. Brock seemed to have taken an interest in him, and he was delighted about it. Having Brock as a traveling companion had been amazing, and he hoped that he would accompany him more. His knowledge on Pokémon had proved far superior than Ash had expected it to be after his gym battle. I'm really happy that you're traveling with me, Brock. Ash's gaze locked with Brock's, but he broke off contact as heat rose on his cheeks. That was an embarrassing thing to say. He shoved his foot underneath the table nervously. He stammered for a moment but spoke again. I mean, it's nice having you around. I've enjoyed traveling with you too, Ash, Brock said enthusiastically. Ash glanced back at him and found Brock's narrow eyes glitter the tiniest bit. Maybe being honest about his feelings wasn't such a bad thing, after all. He returned Brock's lively grin. Glad to hear that. He focused on the issue at hand again. Do you know where we can get the tickets for it? Yeah, Brock continued, resting the spoon in his plate after he'd finished his meal. But the tickets would be pretty difficult to get this late. It's usually fully booked a while before its departure. That's not surprising, Ash said as he finished the last of his food. The popularity of the cruise, especially amongst young trainers, was known throughout the world, so much so that it had even been mentioned in his books in school. A friend of mine left before me from Cerulean City just to get here in time for the SS. Anne, it'll be difficult then, Brock sported a wry smile. We can try going to the port and asking if there are any tickets available, but I don't think we'll be lucky enough for that. Ash smiled wryly, his stomach sank at Brock's words. Yeah, I guess that's the best we can do. Surge still hadn't arrived yet. After they had finished their meal, Ash and Brock went to the main hall of the Pokémon Center to wait for the city's gym leader. Ash again wondered what Surge wanted to give him. Could it be some kind of a TM disc? He'd read that some gym leaders rewarded trainers with a TM for beating them, in addition to the gym badge. Surge made his appearance after a few more minutes of idle chatter about a few questions Ash had about treating Pokémon, with Brock. You kids must have been waiting a long time for me. Surge laughed as he took his seat on the couch opposite Ash and Brock. No, we had lunch in the meantime and got to talk some.